Did you know that flash flooding is the #1 killer in the States? And with a hurricane, you certainly have the potential not only for major wind damage, you have tornadic potential with a hurricane on the rain bands that are circulating around the storm, but you also have that concern for flash flooding. So we're talking flooding emergency in the prairies, and then we talk about it with Arthur. The Weather Network put out this tweet, 5 important tips to prepare for Arthur. So now this becomes a Canadian story next, beginning tomorrow morning. Chris St. Clair put out a great article that you can check out on our website. He talks about all kinds of different tips that you can do, and you know, some are regarding supplies that you might need, or where you might want to be when a tropical storm or post-tropical low. I know it's kind of confusing, right? What is it actually going to be when it gets here at home? I'll tell you, it's going to be a very strong area of low pressure with winds that could exceed 120 kilometers per hour. We could see rainfall amounts as much as 130. If I can just go back to the other maps here that show some of the track information. Thank you very much. This is how wide the wind field is. As that pushes past New York, Boston, which will spare those cities, it is going to move right into the Maritimes. So the big question Chris St. Clair asked, who's live in Halifax all today and tomorrow, when is it going to actually make landfall? About Saturday, early morning hours, 9 a.m. We've got that sort of bullseye right there. So keep it here at the Weather Network. We'll talk more about timing and what you can expect. Looks like we lost Chris St. Clair there, but he brings up a really great point about the foliage on the trees this time of year. And it is early. I think that the last hurricane, I think I read a stat, was Ike. Maybe someone might be able to verify that as far as the landfall in the east. But yeah, it's going to be a big one. Here's the thing. It's going to change characteristically from what it is now to what it's going to do when it's making landfall in Canada. Right now it is a hurricane. It's a Category 1. That's a strong Category 1 because all we need is 4 more kilometers on top of this number, and that would be a Cat 2. The difference between yesterday and today is it's accelerated. That's probably because it's not really dealing with a lot of friction. It's moved out to sea as the models had projected. You might recall we were showing different spaghetti plots yesterday, showing that all models are in agreement that it's going to take that track right into the Maritimes. Wind field, very expansive. So we have winds sustained at 150 right now. By the time that does get into Canadian waters, we're going to see it weaken slightly, but it's going to be a post-tropical storm. See, we've got it here plotted as a low pressure system. You can think about it almost like a summer nor'easter. I'm going to talk to Dr. Doug Gillum about that coming up, and he'll explain how they might be similar to kind of a winter storm minus the snow, of course. Thunderstorm risk potential still in the prairies for this afternoon, and of course our next top story, that's the flooding. Here's Suzanne with more on that.
Your compatible
Thanks
matches
for tuning in here at the
free.
Weather Network, your #1 source for complete and accurate weather forecasts. I'm meteorologist Jaclyn Whittal. Let's get you into the now changing storm. This is Hurricane Arthur, which is a Category 1 storm. That's changed from yesterday when it was Category 2. Winds of 154 kilometers per hour. Now we're at 150, so you can see it's still a very strong storm, and it will be as it tracks into the Maritimes next. However, you'll see this here, extratropical transition. Well, what's that mean? Well, I'm going to bring on Dr. Doug Gillum later on in the show to talk a little bit about how storms sort of change characteristically. We hear a lot about it, but what does it really mean? We're going to have those details for you. And of course, what does this storm mean for the Maritimes? It means a lot of heavy rain, a lot of strong winds, storm surge potential, flooding potential, and we'll talk more about the prairie flooding situation too, which is our other top story. All right, so what you're looking at here is a visible satellite. We only get this in the daytime hours, and then in the evening we have to use a different product. But you can see from yesterday what's changed. Well, firstly, it made landfall at 11:15 p.m. through the Outer Banks of North Carolina. We're also seeing a diminishing eye feature on satellite, so it might still be there, but it's much smaller. Tell you what else is different. This is a radar loop, and yesterday we saw the entire circulation of the whole storm. But that's because we could pick up the radar from the land sites. Now it is pushed back out in the ocean, and it's definitely staying pretty strong, and it's starting to pick up the upper level flow of the jet stream and racing now at 41 kilometers per hour. Yesterday was tracking at about 20 kilometers per hour. All right, now there's the track. So as I mentioned, it's moving into the Maritimes. We said that yesterday. What time? What time do people expect the strongest winds, the strongest rain? I would say Saturday morning for Nova Scotia. We've got this at 9 a.m. as a potential landfall, but we're going to be with you every step of the way. You know, how is this going to feel? It's going to feel kind of like a summer nor'easter storm with plenty of rain, plenty of wind, and that potential for flooding. Now more on the prairie flooding. Certainly one of the hardest hit areas. This is Lake Saskatchewan, and it continues to be under the gun for more flooding potential. If the water rises at all in the next 12 to 24 hours, these conditions could even get worse. Deb Medici has been reporting from southeastern Saskatchewan, doing a great job. But I'll tell you, the last thing that people in this area throughout the prairies as a whole needs is more rainfall. And guess what? We have the potential for it. And severe thunderstorms along this warm front as that pushes east. Notice the jet stream pattern here. So that's why that storm's going to kind of ride along that jet stream. In southeastern Saskatchewan, we have a lot of available energy in the atmosphere. And so if storms go, they could be very severe. They could be isolated. There's severe thunderstorm watch right now. But then it may not happen. Well, when does that happen? When something called the cap is at play. The cap basically means that there's an area of warm air aloft. So an air parcel, in order to form clouds, wants to rise. It has to rise in a cooler environment. If it gets into warmer air, you've got nothing. You've capped. You don't have any storms. So it's either going to be all or nothing, I heard explained earlier, and I thought that was a good analysis. Melfort, Yorkton, Saskatoon, Spiritwood, all under at severe thunderstorm watch. And then these areas as well in Manitoba, pushing into northwestern Ontario. So do expect that you could see some strong storms. Calgary, on the other hand, you are not in the thunderstorm risk. It's all about good times at the kickoff for the Stampede. Here's Margot with more.
Well, does it get any better than this? The energy in Calgary is absolutely fantastic. Of course, everyone is so excited for the beginning of the greatest outdoor show on earth. We have amazing weather for this day. It's looking like the weekend's going to be pretty good as well. We should get a big Yahoo going on. Yahoo for the Calgary Stampede.
I love it. Yahoo. I think I just tweeted yeehaw. Maybe it's Yahoo I should have tweeted. Anyway, it looks like a blast and warm temperatures. It's going to be gorgeous. Partly cloudy conditions right through Sunday for the whole weekend. If you have plans to go to the Stampede, have a blast. Now look at your 7-day forecast for you, Calgary. Temperatures anywhere from about 22 to 28 degrees. All right. Risk of flash flooding in the States is certainly high with hurricanes, but I think it's the #1 killer in the States, I've read as well, flash flooding. Dr. Doug Gillum joins me.
Well, certainly that and storm surge, the big stories when you're dealing with a landfalling hurricane. Storm surge, not so much a concern with this system. Certainly there will be a storm surge, but we're looking at a very widespread area where we're going to see very strong wind gusts.
Okay, what you don't know is that Dr. Doug Gillum lived in Mississippi for, 15 years?
Right.
He has a ton of experience with tropical weather and hurricanes. What is the main difference, do you think, for Maritimers, what they can expect with this storm as opposed to, say, the people in North Carolina?
Well, North Carolina and the Gulf Coast, you really focus on the exact location of landfall. It becomes really important as the focus of the strongest winds is right along the track of the storm. We really want to get away from focusing on the exact track of this system because this is going to really end up looking more like a nor'easter where the wind field is very extensive. So the strongest winds really won't be along with the track of the low, and we're going to see these gusts over 120 kilometers per hour, and this is going to be over an extended period of time as well.
All right, and looking at our cloud tops, our infrared satellite, you do see some tall clouds on the western side. That corresponds with the heavy rain.
That's right. We're seeing a lot of heavy rain and thunderstorms, and as the system moves into the Maritimes, New Brunswick, not so much a windstorm, but rainfall rates 15 to 25 millimeters per hour, and we're seeing the intensification now, the heavier rain and thunderstorms on the left side of the low. As it moves over colder water, we're seeing a breakdown of the tropical characteristics on the east side. So that's why places like Halifax really aren't going to see all that much rain.
All right, we're going to bring Dr. Doug Gillum on just in about another 15-20 minutes. You don't want to miss it. More analysis on Arthur, and of course the other top stories, the prairie flooding. Here's Suzanne Leonard with more. And we continue to track Hurricane Arthur, a Category 1 storm at the moment, but it did make landfall as a Category 2. Now that means that winds were as high as 154 kilometers per hour. Since then, just as we suspected, winds would diminish, and they are. Now they're at 130. Literally 20 minutes ago, they were at 150. So it is diminishing in terms of its strength. It's moving northeast at 43 kilometers per hour. And we're going to talk a little bit about this front with Dr. Doug Gillum coming up later on the show and how that plays into its track, how the jet stream takes over when storms get a little bit further north in this case. There's a look at the track itself. Landfall, and yes, we are calling it a landfall in the Maritimes. Even though it won't be a hurricane still, it'll be post-tropical, and that has to do with all the different things I was just talking about, getting caught up with colder air masses and that kind of thing. But we are looking at a landfall at 9 a.m. The strongest winds will be southeasterly winds for the eastern parts of Nova Scotia. The heaviest rain, just like we've been saying, is still going to be on the left side of the storm, or the western portion of the storm. Now, Sunday it moves through Newfoundland, but it really doesn't become nearly as big of a story. In fact, St. John's will be getting out pretty unscathed for the most part. Now, watch as Arthur tracks up the eastern seaboard. It does move out to sea, as we suspected, or as the models predicted, I should say. Plenty of rain, but it's all over the sea. Boston will certainly get into some heavy rain, and then watch as that circulation really does stay together, and I think that's because we're still seeing it over that open water, so it's really still becoming a strong storm. It is weakening, but still closed circulation really takes on that characteristic of a nor'easter. So if you think of a winter storm, and we know you've had plenty of them in the Maritimes, that is what this storm is going to be like, but take away the snow, thank goodness. So strong winds, there's that heavy rain the model's picking up on, as I mentioned, and then the strongest winds plus rain, but strong winds on the eastern side. But I'm going to talk to Doug a little bit more about, you know, we might even see some peaks of sunshine in some of this event. And you think, you know, why would we see? Well, we'll talk to Doug and he'll give us more details on that. There you see the rain tracks right through Newfoundland. Still going to be getting some heavy rain, but not nearly as much as some other areas. Here's the tropical storm warning issued by Environment Canada. It is widespread from Moncton through Charlottetown, Sydney, Nova Scotia, and down through Halifax. And that will continue for the next 12 to 24 hours, I would presume. Rainfall warnings now. We also have wind warnings in place. A lot to get to. Now, our next story, of course, we'll hand it over to Suzanne Leonard. It's the prairie flooding.